The recession hit the states very hard. Less sales tax and property tax revenue, along with legacy costs, put many states in a financial bind and some of their municipalities near bankruptcy. But there appears to be some daylight now as revenues are coming back and many have in fact cut costs. Bill Brandt is the CEO of Development Specialists, Inc., a firm providing turnaround advice and services to troubled enterprises. Bill, welcome back to Arise.
Always a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. So let's just get a quick update on where we are doing with states, because it was about 6 months ago or so when a lot of states looked pretty poor.
Yeah.
Moody's came out with a report listing a whole bunch of municipalities that were on the brink and may face bond downgrades. What is driving the turnaround and where are we?
Well, the expectations were always fairly grim, and we were pleasantly surprised. What happened is, and I think the bellwether here is California, revenue is up across the board, not just sales taxes, but obviously real estate values and the rest of it, transfer taxes, have put a pile of cash in the California Treasury and in other states' treasuries that was not wholly expected. And so I don't want to say the crisis is over, but as you suggest in your intro, when you combine the current revenue sources with the cost cutting that was effectuated during the recent turndown, the states, some of the states, are in pretty good shape. There are a few, my own Illinois, where I chair the Illinois Finance Authority, Pennsylvania, and others that have yet to fully deal with the pension issues. But, the good news is they've now got a bit more room than they thought because revenues are up. That isn't, an infinite runway. They got to get to it. But we're going to get some breathing space.
And I want to talk about that in a moment, but part of this is the real estate market has come back. Now, some say we're entering another bubble here. And so, the question is whether there's going to be some downside risk for the states here. But is that what's really driving this, the real estate market and some increased tax revenues?
To some extent. California is an odd duck. Because of Proposition 13, California depends less on the real estate tax revenues than people think. It is sales tax and income tax. And when you talk about the fortunes of the California billionaires, which have improved measurably, the Dow driving that a lot,
sure.
The California tax revenues are way up. Other states, Illinois being an example, depend more on real estate tax revenues, and they're lagging a bit. But whether it's a bubble or not, they've got their house in order. If they make wise decisions, they've got some time to put between themselves and the wolf at the door.
Of course, spending is a component of this. Now that we have tax money coming back in, is it going to be harder to cut spending and make the tough choices? Because you said pension control was a big issue, spending elsewhere. Now you have money coming back in, easier to kind of stick your head back in the sand.
It is easier to stick your head back in the stand, but as you and I both know, there have been no end of deferred infrastructure issues, from bridge collapsing in Washington on down. So there's places to put the money that will actually produce jobs. I don't think you're going to see any pressure ease off in the near future for a reduction in the efforts to rein in pension spending and the others. I think that's getting there. People understand that this is, the good times are here, but in Illinois' particular case, Illinois is experiencing a cost at $17 million a day just on the interest for what they've not reined in pension plans. And if for $17 million a day, you let that go a year or two, that's real money.
Sure. Which states, though, are still troubled?
I think Illinois has a long way to go. I think Pennsylvania has a long way to go. New York is coming back but working. But clearly, California took some dramatic steps and has also had a dramatic increase in revenue. But east of the Mississippi, the old Rust Belt states, I think you still got some problems.
Is that revenue, or are these states still spending too much? Or is it both?
It's both. I mean, it depends on what there's so much off-book revenue spending, or off-book, I should say, spending for projects that capital improvements and such that aren't in the annual budgets, that there's some ways to go.
Let's talk about everyone's favorite kicking bag right now, which is Detroit. There's a story that Detroit might have to sell artwork. Do you think that's going to happen?
No, in fact, the artwork is run by a friend of mine, Graham Beal, who's the general manager, if you will, of the Detroit Institute for the Arts. Just today, the Senate in Detroit tried to pass a bill that restricted the availability to sell the arts. But if you're going to sell the art, if you're going to put Detroit into Chapter 9, every asset is available.
And Chapter 9 is municipal banks.
Municipal banks. In fact, today and tomorrow, I think that the emergency manager, Mr. Orr, is meeting with the creditors. And I think a lot of people, when faced with terrific haircuts in their positions, will say, well, what kind of assets do you have that we could possibly sell to minimize the damage to me? That art is one of them.
Okay, so where does Detroit go from here? Where do we stand?
I think Detroit is event-driven, like Harrisburg and Jefferson County. It is not. People walk around thinking we're going to have this vast amount of municipal bankruptcies. We're not. They are They are usually event-driven. They're specific circumstances. Detroit was a city of 2 million people back when I was a child in the 1950s and 1960s. It has only a third of that at this point.
People have moved out. If you go there, they moved to the suburbs.
They moved to the suburbs, but you have a footprint that hasn't shrunk. You've got services that need to be provided. Right, and so you are providing, there's large distances in some cases between houses for the garbage collection. So things will have to get done, but Detroit needs, it's not just
It needs
enough.
new business, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it needs technology companies to come in. It needs to do something.
It needs to do something. You and I have talked about this before. You can't cut your way to profitability. No place, no how. And just giving the creditors a big haircut in Detroit doesn't produce an outcome. Give me a vision. Give me a plan. Tell me why we're doing this and where we're going.
So where do you think Detroit will go then in about 20 seconds or so that we have left?
I think that Detroit needs to go back to the Michigan legislature and get a variety of permissions for enterprise zones and other things to bypass legislative approval in Michigan. Let me do what I can do, if you will, as an emergency manager. Let me try every trick in the book and see what happens, but give me the freedom to do it.
Okay, Bill, thank you so much. Bill Brandt, the CEO of Development Specialist, thank you for coming in. A quick look ahead for Thursday. Retail sales will come in for May, and the weekly jobless claims numbers are out. And Jonathan Savosky will come by to talk about the emerging markets, a big topic this week. That's Arise Exchange for this Wednesday. I'm Andrew Schmertz. The news continues here on Arise.